Greetings, dear folks. Super Sundays here in the Holy Land, the Holy Apple, the Holy Hilltop, Tal Binyamin. We are on the 27th day of the month of Iyar, continuing our important, tremendously important, fundamental, must-listen class. State of Israel, the hand of God or Satan. Finally, a guide for the perplexed. Part 2. Sometimes people come up to me and they ask me, they say, Yehudah, we love the classes, but why are they so long? Folks, I hate to say this. If you want to do something really serious in life, you want to become a doctor, you want to become a lawyer, someone very professional, psychologist, psychiatrist, you don't sit down for 15 minutes or a half hour and expect to become one. How much more so when we're talking about very serious, very important topics of life, of Judaism, of Torah. This is everything. This is a million times more important than becoming a lawyer, a doctor. How much time do we have? So if you want to ask serious questions and expect an answer in 15 minutes or 30 minutes, you got the wrong channel. These questions, in order to answer them honestly, takes time. So you don't have to listen to it in one shot. Take 10 minutes, in the morning, take 10 minutes at night, slowly go through with it, review it, go over it again. But this is God's Torah we're talking about here. This is not Hollywood where the picture ends after 30 minutes with a few commercials. Okay. The Rabbi Chaim Vital, prize student of the Arizal, tells us on the Zohar Kadosh, Book of Exodus, page 11b, tells us an amazing secret. The first 3 months of the year are connected to the first 3 months of the year are connected to our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The month of Nisan is connected to Abraham, is connected to kindness. The month of Iyar, the second month of the year, is connected to Isaac. Isaac's characteristic trait that stood out was courage and strength. Third month of the year is Sivan. It's connected to Jacob. It's connected to splendor, Tiferet, and Torah. The Torah was given in the month of Sivan. Now, many, many years ago, I won't tell you how many, I was in the Sinai desert learning in the yeshiva, and I remember our Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Ariel, getting up and telling us, remember these words, because you'll see it many times as life progresses. Of all the forefathers, I was told 33, 34 years ago, from all our forefathers, Isaac represents the land of Israel. That's what he told us. And folks, boy, did he hit the nail on the head. We see, when we want to investigate, why is that? How true it is, Rabbi Ariel. We know that of all our forefathers, only Isaac never left the land of Israel. Never left. Abraham left, Jacob left. Number 2, the only father that we see who actually worked the land of Israel was only Isaac, because Abraham and Jacob were, of course, shepherds. Working the land, that was only Isaac. Dearest friends, in 1874, there was a meeting to discuss the establishment of a new Jewish community outside the walled cities of Jerusalem in 1874. Once again, the first community outside the walled city of Jerusalem was in 1869, 5 years before, called Nachalat Shiva. The second neighborhood was called Mea Sharim. Why was that? Because when a group of Jews got together on the 5th day of Kislev, it was the portion of the week called Toldot. And in that portion of the week, Toldot, in the book of Genesis, we speak about Isaac and his digging wells, looking for water in the land of Israel. We read about Isaac, and he is having, the nations are coming and trying to stop him from expanding the land of Israel. So anything that he builds, these wells that he digs, they come by and they cement it up. But he doesn't give up hope. So there's a battle going on. Who will settle? Who will settle the land of Israel? And Isaac is tenacious, and he's not giving up. And it talks about the fact that Isaac worked the land, and when it came time for the crops, he received 100 times more crops than he had expected. There was a tremendous blessing because of the sacrifice that he had and the love that he showed of the land of Israel. God rewarded him. So, this neighborhood, it was called Mea Sharim because of the fact that the meeting to discuss the planning of this community outside the walls in 1874 took place during this portion of the week that we read about Isaac and how he had 100-fold blessing. Mea Sharim, that is the religious neighborhood today that you could see. And we have to understand, we don't understand today. Religious Jews might point a finger and say, look at those settlers in Judea and Samaria. Why are they endangering themselves and their families? Who allows this? Is this allowed according to the Torah? Folks, this is hypocrisy at its best. These religious Jews in Nachalat Shiva, they were seven families that were, the husbands learned Torah. They were the ones that settled. They were the first settlers. And in Mea Sharim, where there were 100 families, that's why another reason why it's called 100, Mea. There are 100 families that put money in for homes in this area. We have to understand, why did they call it also Sharim? Because they had to put up gates, because it was dangerous. It was considered to be suicidal to leave the walled cities. How did they do that? They had tremendous faith in God. Even though there were dangers, even though Jews were killed during this period of time, because of the fact that they opened up themselves, they lost that protection of the walls. And they're coming today, 150 years later, and telling the settlers of Judea and Samaria, look at your roots. We would not be here today with that kind of anti-Torah thinking. Folks, of course you can guess the cornerstone of the neighborhood, Mea Sharim, 100 gates. When was the building when did they start building? Of course, in the month of Iyar, as we said, that we have from the Gra, we have from the Arizal, and we have from the Shla Kadosh, this tremendous tradition of the month of Iyar, the 20th day of Iyar, as being tremendous time to succeed in bringing the redemption process. Fast forward. Not forward, but fast forward. Ideal times. And that is when they began. That is when they began the building of Mea Sharim. Rabbi Avram Yitzchak Kook, in his classic Sidur on page 405, called Olot Riyah, he writes there that Isaac represents the land of Israel. Once again, amazing. The Rav Chaim Vital 500 years ago tells us that Isaac is connected to the month of Iyar. Isaac is connected to the land of Israel to blossom this land. And Rabbi Kook comes and says an amazing idea. Look at the name of Isaac. Isaac was named after 4 different names of the land of Israel. Land of Israel has many names. Eretz Yisrael is Yehudah, the name of Yitzchak. The Tzadi in the name of Yitzchak is Eretz Hatzvi. It's the land of a deer. It expands like the skin of a deer. The Chet, it's called in the prophets. Land of Israel is called the land of desire, Eretz Chefetz. So that's the Chet of Yitzchak. And the 4th name of the land of Israel, it's called the Holy Land, Eretz HaKedosha. And that is the acronym. That is the 4 letters of Isaac's name. Not only that, our sages tell us in Breshit Rabbah 64:3. The only time we see this, not by Abraham and not by Jacob, but God comes up to Isaac and tells him to dwell in the land. And our sages take those words, to dwell. What does that mean, to dwell? Listen closely. What does it mean to dwell in the land? Our sages tell us that God told Isaac, make neighborhoods in the land of Israel. Plant in the land of Israel. And sow in the land of Israel. Amazing. This is what God tells only to Isaac, because Isaac represents the month of Iyar. Isaac represents the land of Israel, the love of the land of Israel. And that is why the two of the main historical events that have happened in the last 2,000 years have happened in Iyar, 1948, War of Independence, and 1967, the 6-Day War. But going on, we don't stop there. Shibolei Aleket tells us in his book on chapter 18. This is also brought down by the Beit Yosef in his Jewish law commentary on Orach Chaim. It's beginning of 112, right at the beginning there. He brings down, the Beit Yosef brings down the Shibolei Leket, and he says, the 9th prayer of the Amidah, we're talking about the blessings of the land of Israel. Who instituted that blessing? And folks, believe it or not, you got it. Isaac. When Isaac planted in the land of Israel, and he sowed and he reaped, he said the blessing, Baruch atah, blessed you are Hashem, that you have blessed the land of Israel, you have blessed this year, when he received 100 times fold. That is Isaac. Isaac is connected to the 9th blessing. The 9th blessing is connected to the land of Israel. Going forward here, we mentioned the words of Rav Chaim Vital, who tells us that the month of Iyar is connected to Isaac. Isaac, of course, represents strength and courage. And where do we see that? Where do we see that? So first, the Chatam Sofer tells us on his explanation of the Tractate of Shabbat on page 147, side B. The acronym of the month of Iyar is based on a verse in Psalm 6:11. The verse says, my enemies will return in defeat. They will be embarrassed in an instant. Folks, do we understand? Within the letters, the verse that is connected to the month of Iyar, we talk about defeat of the enemies. We talk about courage. And we spoke about, a few minutes ago, we spoke about, the last lesson we spoke about tremendous courage in 1948 to stand up against the world and declare a state. In 1967, while preparing tens of thousands of graves and being threatened, and the Jewish people were sure that they were going to be annihilated, and tremendous miracles. So think about it. And this month is connected to Isaac, who's connected to courage and strength, and this month is connected to the downfall of Jewish enemies, and that is exactly what we saw before our eyes. If that's not enough, the holy Rabbi Shimshon from Astropoli, he was murdered in 1648 in the Polish Revolution of Chmielnicki. May his memory be erased. Approximately 500,000 Jews were killed during that period of time in 1648. Anyways, he was killed along with 300 other Jews that were donned in the Jewish prayer garb of the talit and also the tefillin. 300 Jews as the Cossacks ran into the synagogue and killed all of them in 1648. He writes that Iyar has special powers to defeat our enemies. This is all based on a verse in Psalms 6:11. The verse that the Chatam Sofer, once again, don't forget, the Rabbi Shimshon of Astropoli never saw the Chatam Sofer. Chatam Sofer was 250 or 275 years ago. So this is amazing. We have two Torah giants telling us this lesson, that Iyar represents the downfall of the enemies of the Jewish people. Courage and strength of Isaac. Love of the land of Israel. Folks, get excited here. Dance around your table. And lo and behold, if we look in the book Seder Olam, chapter 5, it's kind of like a historical, written by Rabbi Yossi Atana. And he tells us there, the first ever battle of the Jewish people fought. Do you know when it happened? In the month of Iyar, of course. And do you know who was victorious? You know the Jewish people were victorious. On the 23rd or the 22nd, there's a dispute amongst the sages exactly what date. But either one is okay by us. 22nd or 23rd of Iyar, the Amalek, arch enemies of the Jewish people, descendants of Esav, Jacob's brother, attacked the Jewish people. The first war between the Jewish people and the nations of the world. This was the first war. It took place in Iyar, just like 1948, 1967. And just like we were victorious now, we were victorious then. In fact, there's an amazing Tosfot in Moshav Zkenim, Exodus 13. Tells us an amazing thing, that Joshua, it says in the Torah, Joshua weakened. What does that mean? It says there that Joshua wanted to put fear in the other nations that they would not attack the Jewish people. Therefore, first thing that he did was he weakened them and only later killed them in order to pass a message, don't mess with us. So first he cut off their legs and the feet of our arch enemies, the Amalekim. And this is really amazing because there was tremendous giants, there were tremendous righteous people, there was Moses. Why didn't God send Moses to fight against the Amaleks? Why didn't God send Aaron? Why didn't God send Hur? They were all present at the time. Why didn't God send those? Why did God decide to send Joshua? Folks, it's an amazing lesson. Because the zodiac sign of the month of Iyar is an ox. Is an ox. An ox represents, of course, strength. And the tribe of Joshua, his flag, the emblem on the flag, the icon on the flag, was of course the ox. Ox represents strength, courage, power. So therefore, we have a tradition, and the tradition is told us by our sages, that the descendants of Esav, Amalek and others, will fall only in the hands of the children of Rachel. And of course, Joseph, the son, the eldest son of Rachel, represents the leader, the fighter against the nations of the world. So therefore, Joshua from the tribe of Ephraim, Joseph, represents the downfall of the enemies of the Jewish people. Therefore, he was sent over the other righteous people. Not only that, we know that Joseph himself is called an ox in the end of the Torah by Moses before he passes away on the 7th day of Adar. He calls each tribe and he expresses the powers in each tribe. And when he turns to Joseph, he tells him he has the strength of the ox. And that's an amazing thing, because ox represents the MBJ, Messiah ben Joseph, the son of Joseph. And when we look at it, the Messiah, the son of Joseph, represents the physical redemption of the Jewish people. Just like Joshua from that family, he represented physical savior from the Jewish enemy. He saved the Jewish people from the Amalek enemy. And that is the job. We have two Messiahs. One is the son of David and one is the son of Joseph. Each has their own specific job. And the job of Joseph is, number one, as we will see later on, is building the physical land of Israel. If it's the fruition of the land of Israel, is the planting, the blossoming of the land of Israel. If it's the physical building of the land of Israel or Jerusalem. If it's bringing Jews back, physical phenomena he represents. So this is an amazing thing. We have Isaac that represents the month of Iyar, and of course he represents strength and courage. And we see, and the fall of our enemies. And this is represented in the first battle of Amalek in the month of Iyar. And we see that the zodiac sign of the month is the ox. And we see that Joshua represents the children of Rachel that will bring down the downfall of our enemies. And we've seen the downfall of our enemies from that period in history all the way down to our times in 1948 and 1967 with the downfall of Arabs. And we'll get to the statistics on that. Amazing statistics. You only hear it from here. Okay. The Yarot Devash, Rav Eivshitz, he writes in his tremendous book, we know that every month is represented by a different tribe. So what is the month of Iyar? Which tribe represents the month of Iyar? Binyamin, which is also amazing, because just like Rav Chaim Vital told us that which one of the forefathers represents the month of Iyar, he told us Isaac, who represents strength and courage. So too, the month is represented by Benjamin. Benjamin, once again, he is a son of Rachel, who the enemies of the Jewish people will fall into his hands. He was the only one that was born in the land of Israel. Amazing. The month of Iyar, Benjamin is the representative, the only son of Jacob born in the land of Israel. The only son not to bow down to Esau. Strength, courage, that is the land of Israel. Mordechai, descendant of Benjamin, does not bow down to the wicked Haman. And Benjamin, when they came to the sea and the Egyptians were running after them and the sea in front of them, it was a hopeless situation. Who jumped into the water? We are told in the Tractate of Sota, page 37a, we are told that Benjamin ran into the water first with tremendous amount of self-sacrifice. This is all happening in the month. This is all represented in the month of Iyar. He is our representative tribe. And we take it one step further, dear friends. We spoke about, at the beginning of the class, we spoke about the 9th blessing. How it's brought down by the Shibolei Leket, also brought down by Rabbi Yosef Cairo in the Code of Jewish Law, that this was created by Isaac when he worked the land of Israel. Now, we also have the Talmud in Tractate Megillah, page 17, side B, tells us another take on this. Tells us that the 9th blessing is connected to the downfall of the wicked. How is that possible? I thought the blessing talks about the fruition of the land, the produce of the land of Israel. It does. But the Talmud tells us that, unfortunately, many people would take advantage of the population and they would rip them off when it came to selling produce to the population. Many of them were poor. They would rip them off. So this blessing comes as a request to God to stop these wicked people from taking advantage of ripping off the population. Now, the Talmud tells us on this page that this is based on the 9th Psalm. In the 9th Psalm now, you look in your Psalms, you'll say, Yehudah, it's number 10. That's the question of the Gemara. The Gemara answers that the Psalm number 1 and 2 are really only 1. So 10 is really 9. Got that? Okay, so your question was asked in the Talmud. Now, so the verse is on Psalms chapter 10, verse 15. It says there, God, please destroy the outstretched hand of the wicked. Once again, this 9th blessing, which is connected to Isaac, who is connected to the month of Iyar, as told to us by Rabbi Chaim Vital, and is connected to the fall of Amalek by Joshua, descendant of Rachel, and the month of courage of Benjamin, not bowing down, sacrificing his life to jump into the sea. This is connected to the downfall of our enemies. So, to summarize, the 9th blessing in the Amidah prayers are connected to the land of Israel. The blossoming of the land of Israel, we will see later on, is connected to the redemption. When you see the land of Israel beginning to produce fruit and vegetables in a nice fashion, there is no clearer sign of the redemption. Sanhedrin 98a. So that's number 1. Number 2, the 9th blessing is connected to Isaac, working the land of Israel. And last but not least, this 9th blessing is also connected to the downfall of the wicked. And unbelievable, on that same page, in the Talmud, we are told that when you see wars, when the Jewish people begin to fight wars, this is the clearest sign of redemption. This is a tremendous sign of redemption. Think about that. When you begin to see wars, in the last 2,000 years, when have the Jews participated in wars as the Jewish people? There have been Jews that were forced into various nations' armies, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the Jewish people fighting. When did we see that in the last 2,000 years? Well, we didn't. Folks, think about that. Wars, the downfall of the wicked, all connected to this month of Iyar. Think about how many wicked leaders have been hit, have been knocked off by the Jewish Secret Service, not only within the land of Israel, but all over the world. Think about the nuclear reactor in Iraq. Think about all the Iranian convoys of missiles and ammunition for people, for the Hezbollah in Lebanon being blown up. Do we understand what's going on here? Do we understand how many Jewish lives, tens of thousands of Jewish lives, have been saved by the fact that, thank God, the Jewish people are able to strike those before they strike us, or those that have struck us, but this is your last dance. And amazingly, talking about the month of Iyar, wars, the beginning of the redemption, let's look at some statistics. Okay, let's go through them. Put a smile on your face. Look how many Jewish enemies have been destroyed in the past 73 years. Put a smile on your face. Celebrate. Let's begin. 1948, War of Independence. 20,000 enemies of the Jewish people were killed. 1956, the Sinai operation. In 1956, 3,000 enemies of the Jewish people destroyed, killed. 1969 to 1970, the War of Attrition, 10,000 enemies destroyed. Six-Day War, 1967. In 6 days, 21,500. In 1973, the Yom Kippur War, 19,600 enemies of the Jewish people destroyed, killed. Lebanon War in 1982, I had the merit to be there. 17,000 enemies of the Jewish people, enemies of humanity, destroyed. First Arab uprising in the land of Israel, 1987, 1,491 enemies of the Jewish people destroyed. In the year 2000, with those suicide bombers. Second Arab uprising, in the year 2000, 3,980 Arabs killed. In 2002, Operation Protective Shield, 497 Arabs, enemies of the Jewish people, killed. Second Lebanon War in 2006, 986 enemies. Operation Lead Cast, or Cast Lead, 1,200 enemies of the Jewish people, bite the dust. Operation Pillar Cloud in 2012, 169 enemies bit the dust. Operation Strength of the Cliff in 2014, 2,203 enemies of the Jewish people. If you do the math, it comes out in the last 73 years. And folks, believe me, trust me, the list is much greater. But, you know, Israel's afraid, so they have to keep the numbers down. So think about this.
Still, in the last 73 years, 101,636 have been destroyed. Think about if these people would have began families and had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kids. Multiply that by, let's say, 5. We're talking about 500,000, if not for God's gift to us of strength and not bringing us back to the land of Israel in this month of Iyar, the month of the defeat of our enemies, orchestrated beautifully by God. These two major historical events in 2,000 years in the same month, Iyar, downfall of our enemies. What threat would the Jewish people have all over the world, not just in the land of Israel, but all over the world? Thank God. Thank God for this. We haven't seen such a thing in 2,000 years. Is this God's hand or Satan's? Moving right along. The building of the temple, of the Beit HaMikdash, when did it take place? Amazingly. Put on those seatbelts. Going for a ride. First temple, we are told in Kings 1, chapter 6, verse 1. King Solomon begins the building of the first temple in the month of Iyar. You got that one right. Month of Iyar. Remember the words of the Gra, the words, hundreds and hundred years later, the words of the Shla Kadosh, the words of the Arizal, that any program, any plan to bring upon redemption for the land of Israel, for Jerusalem, if possible, should be begun in the month of Iyar. This is not just from them, the last 500 years. We see that the cornerstone of the first temple also in the month of Iyar. Because in order to build a temple, you have to destroy the enemies. So they go hand in hand. Talked about this month, Iyar, being month that the enemies fall of the Jewish people. Second temple, when was it? When did the building begin? You got it. You had a good guess there. In the book of Ezra, chapter 3, verse 8, we are told that the beginning of the second temple also took place in the month of Iyar. And we are told that, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, the tribe that represents the month of Iyar, of course, is Benjamin. And we are told in Tractate Sota, page 37, side A, we are told that because of the fact that Benjamin had tremendous self-sacrifice, to jump into the sea when the Egyptians were chasing after them, and in front of them the sea, and they jumped in, and they were willing to give their lives for God and the Jewish people. So therefore, they merited that the Holy of Holies was in the portion of Benjamin. The temple was divided by two tribes, one Benjamin and one Judah. And the Holy of Holies was on the side of Benjamin. How did he merit? Because of the fact that he was willing to sacrifice. And therefore he merited. Or, according to Tosfot Riva, on the portion of Zot HaBracha, 33:12, in the name of Rabbeinu Tam, also brought down in Targum Sheni, Megillat Esther, on chapter 3, verse 3, they all say the same thing. The reason why Benjamin merited to have the Holy of Holies, the Temple Mount, built in his inheritance, was due to the fact that he did not bow down to Esav. He was the only tribe member that did not bow down to Esav, and that's why his descendants, Mordechai, who seemingly endangers the Jewish people,
only to bring not danger to the Jewish people, but the downfall of the enemies of the Jewish people. Not only Haman, not only his sons, but we know that they killed 75,000+ of these enemies of the Jewish people, all stemming from the tremendous courage and strength represented by Benjamin, represented by the month of Iyar. And therefore, do you have a doubt? Do we have a doubt that the third temple, the cornerstone, the foundation of the third temple has been laid? It was laid in 1948 in the month of Iyar, just like the first and second temple. It was laid in the month of Iyar in 1967, just like the first and second temple. You got it. You know it. If you don't see it, you're blind. This is the foundation. What we are experiencing today, the ingathering of the exiles, and the blossoming of the land of Israel, and the powerhouse that Israel has turned into. This is all the blessings of Hashem at this time in the merit of our forefathers. And folks, when we think about this month of Iyar, and we think about Benjamin, and we think about the zodiac sign being the ox, strength and courage, what can we say? When have we seen Jews volunteering? This is not something that was forced upon us, that someone is given a choice to transgress a commandment or not. When have we seen so many Jews, hundreds of thousands of Jews, willingly ready to sacrifice their life for the commandment of living in the land of Israel, settling in the land of Israel, conquering the land of Israel? Up until today, there are more than 23,740 some Jews have been murdered by Arabs in the land of Israel. That includes civilians and soldiers. It includes what they call terror of our enemies. That is an amazing thing. Volunteering. They don't have to do it. There are many Jews that don't. There must be 50 ways to, to leave that responsibility. But they didn't. So that's an amazing limud zchut, a tremendous beauty towards God when we think about the willingness of people to sacrifice their lives, and they have. And this is all in the spirit of Benjamin. It's all in the spirit of the ox. It's all in the spirit of the downfall of our enemies during this time, and the redemption process of the Jewish people in its positive side. We have a tremendous lesson. We're talking about the downfall of the enemies. We're talking about vengeance against the nations. Listen closely, dear friends. Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, he tells us in his work, Tzidkat HaTzadik, paragraph 218. He tells us an amazing secret, that before, it says in the Torah, that Elijah, it says in the prophets, that Elijah will come before the coming of the Messiah. Hinei anochi sholech lachem et Eliya Navi. What does that mean? You know what it means, he tells us? That it means Elijah will come before Messiah. That means Elijah will come. The trait of Elijah. What is the trait? The trait is vengeance against the nations of the world. That is the trait of Elijah. And that's what you will see. Rav Tzadok tells us an amazing insight. When you see the Jewish people beginning for the first time in 2,000 years, beginning to take vengeance against Jewish enemies all over the globe, baby. This is the clearest sign of Elijah welcoming in the coming of the Messiah. It's a process. It's happening. The wheels are rolling. But that's an amazing lesson. And then, in the 1400s, lived a tremendous Torah scholar and a tremendous statesman, Rabbi Isaac Abarvanel. He was one of the Jews. He could have chosen to remain. The king and queen of Spain agreed that he could stay. He was the minister of finance in Spain, and a very prestigious position. And he was offered to be able, even though the Jews were being expelled from Spain in 1492, he was offered that he could stay. And he said, I'm with my people. Goodbye. And he left. He left it all and went with the Jewish people, suffering with the Jewish people. And he has a commentary on the Torah, on the prophets, on the scrolls, and an amazing page in his commentary on the book of Isaiah. It's called Yeshuot Meshicho. It's volume 2. It's the first study, and it's in chapter 4. Amazing. Listen closely to the words of the Abarvanel. Abarvanel asks, I don't understand. How in the world were the sages, how in the world was Rabbi Akiva fooled to think that Bar Kokhba, who began a revolt against the Romans almost 2,000 years ago, 65 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, he began a revolt for, some say 2.5, some say 3.5 years against the Romans. How could it be? Not only that, Maimonides learns Jewish laws from this assumption. This assumption is not incorrect. This assumption was correct. There's some things that went wrong, but the base, the foundation is correct. When Rabbi Akiva saw this tremendous strength and wars and vengeance that Bar Kokhba was participating in, he was correct in thinking of him as Messiah. But asks the Abarvanel, I don't understand. We know that one of the jobs of Messiah is that they must judge. In fact, they judge by smell. You know, there's interesting expressions in English like, I smell trouble. Why do they use the sense of smell? Or, I smell something bad. Doesn't mean that something stinks. It means that I feel that something bad is about to happen over here. And there are many such expressions when we use the terminology of smell, which represents an understanding of a situation. So we are told in the prophets that one trait of the Messiah will be he will be able to judge people according to the smell. He'll be able to decide a court decision according to smell. We don't see that Bar Kokhba partake in any fashion when it came to law and order. We don't see that he partook in such an endeavor. So that's number one. And question number two, Abarvanel says, how could the sages and Rabbi Akiva think he was Messiah, but he was not from the genealogy and the family of King David? So how could he be Messiah? And then an amazing lesson. Engrave this on everyone's heart. Listen to the words. This is brought down by others later on, but he is the original. I'm summarizing his words. Rabbi Akiva, the words of the Abarbanel, Rabbi Akiva did not think that Bar Kokhba was the Messiah, the son of David, in the literal sense, as he did not serve as a judge for the people. A specific task designated for the Messiah. Rabbi Akiva, however, believed that Bar Kokhba was a messenger from God to take revenge against Jewish enemies. It was an accepted tradition that before the coming of the Messiah, the son of David, would come the Messiah, the son of Joseph, we spoke about. Joshua fighting and eliminating the descendants of Amalek, the first battle between the Jewish people in the month of Iyar. So before we have a tradition, before the coming of the Messiah, the son of David, will come the Messiah, the son of Joseph, to fight and avenge Jewish blood and against the Jewish enemies. When Rabbi Akiva saw the great wars and courage and strength of Bar Kokhba, he saw him in this role. He didn't see him as the spiritual Messiah of the Jewish people, but he saw that through this was the first Messiah. This was the beginning of the redemption. When you see wars, when you see Jewish strength, when you see vengeance against the enemies of the Jewish people, against countries that want to annihilate the Jewish people, when you see this happening, you know this is the Messiah time. This is Messiah, the son of Joseph, the beginning stages. You know it's at our doorstep. Folks, open up your hearts for this. This is really amazing. This idea is brought down in a few places. It's originally from the Arizal, brought down by Rab Chaim Vital. For example, you could find it in his book of Likutim on the portion of the week of Azinu, page 326, or the book of Reincarnation, chapter 1, page 2. And here's the idea brought down by the Arizal and Rav Chaim Vital, and brought down in hundreds of books throughout the ages. There is the word Adam, Adam. We are called people. The world is called, in Hebrew, Ben Adam, Bnei Adam, Bnei Enosh. Descendants of Adam. Now, Adam, the Arizal brings down, is a acronym of three great leaders. Aleph, Adam. Daled, David. Mem, Messiah. And the Arizal is telling us that from the beginning of creation until the final redemption, there is a process. The process began with Adam, and he wasn't able to bring it to a close. And therefore he passed the baton on to David, King David. King David almost brought the redemption, but was unsuccessful. And he passes it on to King Messiah. This is all basically a process of beginning of creation till the final redemption. Now, this is an amazing idea. I'm not sure who brought it down, but it's an amazing. I've heard it many times. I don't know exactly who the source is. If you look at the years between Adam, the first letter, and Daled, David, the second letter, the years separating them are 2,854 years, which means King David was born 2,854 years after the creation of Adam. Now, if we do the math and we say, listen, from Adam until David, when we were hoping for the final redemption process to finish by David, but it did not. That was a process of 2,854 years. It is safe to say that the process that King David began and finishes with Messiah is also 2,854 years. Well, dear friends, take out your calculators, take out your toes and your fingers, do the math, baby. 2854 and 2854 brings you to 5,708, or in Gentile terms, 1948. The creation, the establishment, the declaration of the state of Israel, the beginning of the redemption. Amazing. Adam, Adam, acronym, Adam, David, and Messiah. 2854 between Adam and David, 2854 between David and the beginning of our final redemption. Those are things that you cannot make up. And another thing that we cannot make up, and we'll end the second class with this note. Amazing information, godly information. We said that the 5th of ER in 1948 was on a Friday, because the British were supposed to leave on Saturday. But the Jews did not want to desecrate Sabbath, so they decided to make the meeting earlier, not wait till Saturday. They made the meeting on Friday, and that in Friday afternoon, approximately 1 o'clock, they declared and announced statehood. So, that was on Friday. That Sabbath in the land of Israel, what was the portion of the week? We know, as I said, time is not only of the essence, time is essence. And whatever we read on the portion of the week, it is connected to the events, the current events of that week. This is a foundation of Torah. So folks, in the portion of that week, it was the portion of Emor, what we read yesterday. And in there, in Vayikra Rabbah 28:6, it tells us an amazing connection. It tells us in that portion that we read 73 years ago in the land of Israel, it tells us that a person should take seriously the mitzvah of the Omer, the process that we're in, the 40-day process that we're in from Passover to Shavuot, accepting the Torah. You should not take this process lightly. Why? Because of this great mitzvah of counting, Abraham received the land of Israel from God. Folks, do we understand? Abraham who lived 4,000 years before this day. That was a few hours later. That is what we read in synagogues all over the land of Israel. That God has promised that if we take the counting of the Omer seriously, He will give us the land of Israel. And that's what happened on the 5th day of Iyar, 1948. And that's what we read in the portion of the week. But I don't know how it can get even greater than that, but it does. See, that year there was a difference between what we read in the land of Israel and what we read outside the land of Israel. So outside the land of Israel, it happened to be that Sabbath, the day after the declaration of the state of Israel. It happened to be they read the portion of Kedoshim, and the Haftorah is after the Torah reading. There's we take a book of the prophets and we read a certain portion which is connected to the portion. And look, I will read. What did we read? This was a tremendous, and it's really amazing. In the land of Israel, we talked about the promise of God that if we keep the counting of the Omer, we will receive the inheritance of the land of Israel, and that happened. That was God's message to us. It was live. It was online. But listen to this great. In outside of Israel, they needed a different message. What was their message? Listen to the message. I read from the prophet of Amos, chapter 9, starting at verse 13. Behold, days are coming, the words of Hashem, when the plowman will meet the reaper, and the treader of grapes will meet the one who carries the seed. The mountains will drip juice, and all the hills will melt. I will return the captivity of my people, and they will rebuild desolate cities and settle them. Do we hear what is going on? I don't understand. If you don't faint, if you don't freak out, there's something wrong with your Jewish heart. Go to your Jewish doctor. All Jews are doctors, no? And check out what's going on with your heart. And they will rebuild desolate cities and settle them. They will plant vineyards and drink their wine. They will cultivate gardens and eat their fruits. I will plant them upon their land, and they will never again be uprooted from their land that I have given them, said Hashem, your God. I mean, folks, I don't have to say, I rest the case. Do we understand the words? These were the words to the people outside the land of Israel. You will come, you will rebuild the desolate cities, you will settle. How many people receive that message? We know that the Torah tells us that every day a heavenly voice comes out and says, come back to the land of Israel. How many people have heard that voice? Unfortunately, only a few hundred thousand. A few hundreds of thousands. But still, a majority, slight, as we said, 47% of Jews today live in the land of Israel, so it's a slight majority. 53% are still not in the land of Israel. And these were the words that we read less than 24 hours after the declaration of the State of Israel in 1948 on Friday, the 5th day of Iyar, the 20th day of the Omer. Don't touch that dial till next week, God willing.